I sat alone in my small Los Angeles apartment, my fingers trembling as I navigated to the live stream on my phone. The wedding of the century, they called it. Carter Morgan, the golden boy of morning television, was marrying Emma Reed, the social media darling with the perfect smile. I watched as the camera panned across the venue, crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, celebrities dabbing tears from the corners of their eyes. My name is Taylor Williams. 5 years ago, I was a production assistant at Network 9, and Carter was the rising star everyone whispered about. I still remember the first time he really noticed me, during a late-night production meeting. I had suggested a segment that made him laugh, and afterward, he asked for my name. "You have good instincts, Taylor," he said, his voice warm like honey. "We should talk more about your ideas sometime." And that sometime became coffee breaks in his dressing room, then dinners after everyone left, then nights in his apartment where we'd talk about everything. His dreams of being the next big thing in television, my hopes of becoming a producer someday. We kept it secret. Office relationships were frowned upon, especially between a star and his assistant. "I've never met anyone who gets me like you do," he whispered one night, his fingers tracing my collarbone. "This feels real, Taylor. Different." 6 months into our secret relationship, I sat on the edge of my bathtub, staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. 3 tests later, the reality sank in. I was pregnant with Carter's child. That night, I waited for him in his apartment, my heart hammering against my ribs as I heard his key in the lock. "Carter, I need to tell you something," I said, my voice barely audible. His face changed when I told him, first shock, then a flash of something I couldn't read, before he pulled me into his arms. "I'll take care of everything," he promised, kissing my forehead. "Us, the baby, everything. Just give me a little time to figure out the right way to handle this." I fell asleep in his arms, believing every word. When I woke up the next morning, he was gone. A text said he had an early meeting. I didn't worry, until hours passed with no response to my messages. Then days. My calls went straight to voicemail. My emails bounced back. It was as if Carter Morgan had disappeared from my life as completely as if he'd never existed. 2 weeks after Carter disappeared, I was called into HR. Barbara, the human resources director, avoided eye contact as she slid a severance package across her desk. "The network is restructuring," she said, the corporate euphemism hanging heavily between us. "Is it because of Carter?" I asked directly. Barbara's eyes flickered with something like pity. "Taylor, I'd suggest you take this package and move on. Some battles aren't worth fighting." That afternoon, I cleaned out my desk while coworkers averted their eyes. Jessica from Makeup, once my friend, whispered as I passed, "I heard you tried to trap him with a baby to get famous." The words hit like a physical blow, so that was the story being spread. That night, I called my mother, desperate for comfort. "Mom, I'm pregnant," I said, my voice breaking. "And I've lost my job." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "How could you be so careless?" she finally said, her voice thick with disappointment. "After everything we sacrificed for your education." She hung up before I could respond. My father was more direct in his text. "You made your choices, now live with them." I spent the next months in a fog, watching my savings dwindle as my belly grew. I applied for jobs, but word travels fast in the entertainment industry. Doors that should have been open remained firmly closed. When labor started, I called an Uber to take me to the county hospital. The driver asked cheerfully if someone was meeting me there. I smiled tightly and said yes, the lie easier than explaining I had no one. 16 hours later, I held my son for the first time. Noah had Carter's eyes, deep blue and intense, even as a newborn. "He's a handsome little guy," the nurse said, adjusting his blanket. Looks just like that TV host, doesn't he? The one all the ladies love. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. That night, in the sterile hospital room with Noah, sleeping in the bassinet beside me, I started writing in a notebook I'd brought. Dear Noah, today you were born, and you changed everything. I don't have all the answers yet, but I promise you this. You will never wonder if you are loved. Noah grew into a curious, bright-eyed toddler who loved dinosaurs and could recite the alphabet backward by age 3. I worked 2 jobs, administrative assistant by day, freelance content writer by night, to keep our small apartment and pay for his daycare. Each night, I'd add to his journal, recording his milestones, his questions, my promises. When Noah was 4, he started asking about his father. Mommy, Jake has a daddy who picks him up. Where's my daddy? I froze, a spoonful of macaroni and cheese halfway to my mouth. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times, but now that it was here, words failed me. Your daddy lives far away, I finally said. Does he know about me? Noah asked, his little face so earnest it broke my heart. He knows, I said, choosing my words carefully. But sometimes grown-ups make complicated choices. That night, I couldn't sleep. Carter had continued his meteoric rise, becoming the host of Good Morning America. I'd see his face on billboards, magazine covers, television screens in store windows. He'd never once reached out, never once acknowledged that he had a son. Then came the day that changed everything. I was working at a corporate event, checking in guests as part of my temp job. I didn't know Carter would be there until I saw him walking through the door with his entourage. He walked right past me, his eyes sliding over me without recognition. But as he moved past, something fluttered from his coat pocket. A business card, I thought at first. When the lobby cleared, I found it wasn't a card, but a hair from a brush, caught in the lining of his coat. I held it, this tiny piece of him, and a plan formed. The next day, I ordered a paternity test kit online, following the instructions precisely. 3 weeks later, the results arrived, 99% probability that Carter Morgan was Noah's father. That night, I searched through an old cloud backup of my phone and found something I'd forgotten. A voice message Carter had sent the night I told him I was pregnant, before he disappeared. His voice, tender and excited, saying he couldn't wait to start our family, that he was just figuring out how to time the announcement for both our careers. It was all lies, but now I had proof, both of Noah's paternity and of Carter's initial intention to acknowledge him before he changed his mind. The announcement of Carter's engagement to Emma Reed was everywhere. Entertainment news, social media, billboards. Their wedding would be live-streamed for a charity donation drive. America's perfect couple sharing their perfect day. I was folding laundry when Noah, now 5, climbed onto the couch next to me. On the television, a reporter gushed about Carter and Emma's love story. "Mommy," Noah said, pointing at the screen. "That's the man on your old pictures. The one you said is my daddy." My breath caught. I'd kept one photo, tucked in my journal. Carter and me at a company picnic before we were a secret, when we were just co-workers posing for a group shot. I hadn't realized Noah had found it. "If we meet him," Noah asked, his eyes wide, "can I ask him why he doesn't visit us?" I looked at my son, Carter's chin, Carter's eyes, my stubborn determination, and made a decision. The day of the wedding, I dressed Noah in his best clothes, a little suit I'd found at a thrift store and carefully altered. I wore a simple blue dress, nothing fancy, nothing that would stand out. We took the bus to the hotel where the ceremony was being held. "Remember what I told you?" I said to Noah as we approached the security checkpoint. "We're just going to watch. We're not going to talk to anyone." A security guard stopped us at the entrance. "Invitation?" he asked, eyeing my lack of designer label. I'm an old colleague, I said, my heart pounding. From Network 9. He looked skeptical until a voice behind him said, "She's okay, Jim. I know her." It was Derek, a cameraman I'd worked with years ago. He nodded at me, his eyes lingering on Noah. "Good to see you, Taylor. It's been a while." As he let us through, he whispered, "You're here for the right reasons. I won't stop you." We slipped into the back of the ballroom just as the ceremony began. Carter stood at the altar, handsome in his tuxedo, Emma radiant in white. As they exchanged vows, Noah's hand tightened in mine. "He's saying he'll love her forever," Noah whispered. "Did he say that to you too?" Before I could answer, Noah pulled away from me and darted forward, weaving through the seated guests before I could catch him. "Wait!" I called. But it was too late. Noah had reached the front of the ballroom, and in the moment when the officiant asked if anyone had reason to object, my 5-year-old son climbed the 3 steps to the platform and tugged on Carter's sleeve. The room fell silent. Carter looked down, confusion creasing his perfect face. "Are you my daddy?" Noah asked, his voice clear in the hushed room. "Mommy has your picture, and she writes to you in my book every night." I rushed forward, my face burning, but I couldn't bring myself to pull Noah away. Carter stared at my son, recognition dawning in his eyes as he took in the features that mirrored his own. "Security!" someone called, but Emma raised her hand. "Wait," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hand. She looked from Noah to Carter. "Is this true?" Carter's mouth opened and closed, no words emerging. His eyes found mine in the crowd, and for the first time in 5 years, we truly saw each other. I walked forward, my legs somehow carrying me despite the weakness in my knees. From my purse, I took the folder containing the paternity test, the recovered voice message on a USB drive, and the journal I'd kept for Noah, filled with 5 years of one-sided conversations with the father he'd never met. "I didn't come to ruin your day," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "But my son deserves to know the truth, and so does your bride." The cameras, meant to capture the joyous union, now recorded this unscripted moment. Phones throughout the audience were raised, capturing every second. Within minutes, #WhoIsNoah was trending. Emma took the folder from my hands, her composure remarkable as she quickly scanned the contents. Her eyes widened and the paternity test lingered on the journal entries. "You knew?" she asked Carter, her voice carrying in the silent room. "You've known for 5 years that you have a son?" Carter's publicist rushed forward, whispering urgently in his ear, but Emma silenced him with a look. "Answer the question, Carter," she said. Carter straightened his shoulders, slipping into his camera-ready persona. "This isn't the place to discuss private matters," he said smoothly. "Security, please escort these people out so we can continue our celebration." But Emma stepped back, removing her hand from his arm. "No," she said firmly. "I think this is exactly the place. Before I commit my life to you, I need to know who you really are." She turned to me, her expression unreadable. "How long were you together?" "Almost a year," I answered, "until the day I told him I was pregnant." A murmur swept through the crowd. Emma nodded slowly, then removed her veil. "I'm sorry," she said, addressing the guests, "but there won't be a wedding today." As she walked down the aisle and out of the ballroom, Carter finally found his voice. "Taylor, you had no right." "I had every right," I cut in, my voice steady. "Not for me, for Noah. Your son has spent 5 years wondering why his father doesn't want him. He deserves better than that." And in the front row, a woman I recognized as the producer of a rival network was filming everything on her phone. Her expression a mixture of shock and professional interest. The aftermath was a blur. Security finally ushered us out, but the damage was done. By evening, the story was everywhere. Carter's publicist released a statement expressing his shock at these allegations and promising to address this private matter appropriately. And I received calls from every talk show and news program in the country. Reporters camped outside our apartment building until the manager threatened to call the police. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from old colleagues, distant relatives, even high school classmates I hadn't spoken to in a decade. 3 days after the wedding that wasn't, my mother called. "Taylor," she said, her voice small. "I saw the news. Is it true? All of it?" "Yes," I said simply. "Every word." "Why didn't you tell us how bad it was? Why didn't you make us understand?" I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. "I tried, Mom. You didn't want to hear it." The silence stretched between us, 5 years of distance too great to bridge in one conversation. "I'd like to meet my grandson," she finally said, "if you'll let me." It was a start. That same day, I received a call from Diane Winters, the producer I'd seen filming at the wedding. She offered me something unexpected, not a tell-all interview, but a documentary about single mothers failed by both partners and systems meant to protect them. "Your story resonated with millions," she said, "not because it's sensational, but because it's real. There are women everywhere who've been silenced, who've had to fight alone. Would you consider sharing your experience, not to shame Carter, but to help others feel less alone?" I considered her offer, watching Noah play with his dinosaurs on our living room floor. He deserved more than to be a tabloid headline, more than to be defined by one dramatic moment. "I'll do it," I said, "but only if it's about more than just me and Carter, and only if Noah's privacy is protected." "Of course," Diane agreed. "This isn't about exposing a celebrity. It's about telling the truth about what it means to be left behind." The studio lights were softer than I expected, the makeup artist more gentle. I'd brought my journal, 5 years of entries to Noah, documenting every milestone, every question about his father, every promise I'd made to him that one day he would understand. "We're not live," Diane assured me, as the cameras prepared to roll. "We can stop any time you need to." I nodded, smoothing my dress, another thrift store find, but carefully selected for this moment when I would finally tell my story on my own terms. "I want to start by saying this," I began when the cameras rolled. "I didn't crash a wedding for revenge or attention. I did it because after 5 years of silence, of being erased from someone's narrative, I needed to reclaim my voice, for myself, and more importantly, for my son." I told them everything: the secret relationship, the joy when I discovered I was pregnant, the betrayal when Carter disappeared, the whispers that followed me, the doors that closed, the family that turned away. "The hardest part wasn't raising a child alone," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion rising in my throat. "It was watching someone deny my child's existence while being celebrated as America's most trustworthy personality. It was trying to explain to a 4-year-old why his father's face is everywhere, but never in our home." When the interview ended, Diane handed me an envelope. "This came for you at the studio," she said. Inside was a letter from my mother, pages long, tear-stained in places. "My dearest Taylor, I was afraid of what people would think, afraid they would judge us for your choices, for your situation. But watching you stand in that ballroom, fighting not for yourself but for your son, I realized that I failed you when you needed me most. The truth doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. You taught me that. I hope someday you can forgive me. All my love, Mom." 2 weeks after the interview aired, Carter's lawyer contacted me. They wanted to arrange visitation, child support, all the things that should have been settled years ago. Noah would finally have his father acknowledge him, not because of love, but because public opinion had forced his hand. It wasn't a perfect ending. Noah still had questions I couldn't answer. The media still occasionally hounded us, but something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer the woman who had been abandoned, who had been silenced. I was the woman who had stood up, who had fought back, who had shown her son what it means to speak truth even when your voice shakes. The last entry in Noah's journal read, "My darling boy, today you asked me if I was still sad about everything that happened. The truth is, I'm not sad anymore. I'm proud. Proud of the journey that brought us here. Proud of the strength we found together. Proud of the family we've built, just the two of us. From now on, we won't step back anymore. We'll move forward together into whatever comes next. All my love, Mom." As I closed the journal, Noah climbed into my lap, his small arms wrapping around my neck. "Are we going to be okay, Mommy?" he asked, his eyes, so like his father's, searching mine. I held him close, breathing in the scent of his hair, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine. "Yes," I promised. "We already are."